just to introduce myself a little bit first, my name is Audra Mills, and I am currently a zoology major with a botany minor, and I'm a senior this semester. Today, I'm going to be talking about the interactions between termites and Acacia drepanobium. I'm mostly going to be concentrating on a study that was published in 2010 called Termites, Vertebrate Herbivores and the Fruiting Success of Acacia drepanobium. That was done by Allison K. Brody, Tom M. Palmer, Keena Fox Dobbs, and Dan F. Doick. And in this study, they wanted to find the answer to three main questions. The first question was, to what extent is fruit production of the acacia tree correlated with proximity to termite mounds? The second was, what is the relative contribution of nutrient enhancement by termites versus that from herbivores to tree reproduction? And the third question was, do the species of ant inhabitants, which differ in their degree of protection, help explain patterns of reproduction? So first, this is a picture of the Acacia drepanobium. The little balls are actually where the ants usually live. They are modified thorns, so that's kind of interesting. And this is a picture of the fruits that were studied. So the name of the tree was actually changed to Vachellia drepanobium in 2011 when acacia trees were separated into additional genera. Its common name is a whistling thorn due to the sound that is made when the wind goes through the little modified thorns. The tree is found in Central and Eastern Africa and can grow to be about 18 feet. And the trees are myrmecophytes, which basically just means that they have a mutualistic relationship with ants. The ants of this tree live in the modified thorns, like I said, and they protect the trees, and some of them eat the nectar that the leaves produce. So a little bit about the ants. There's a picture of the ants getting on the tree and towards the modified thorn there. And for the ants, there are one of 4 species of ants that will live in the tree, and they each have a varying degree of benefit to the tree. The 3 species of ants are Chromatogaster, Jostedi, Mimosae, Nigriceps, and Tetrapanera penzigi. The Nigriceps are great at protection, but they do sterilize the tree by removing the axillary and apical meristems so that it can't produce. So because of that, any ants or any trees that were inhabited by these ants were excluded from this study. The Jostedi, on the other hand, are not the best protectors, but they are more likely to inhabit a tree that is next to a termite mound because they're not great protectors. The Mimosae have the strongest mutualistic relationship of the 4 species of ants. They're great at defending the tree, and they live in the modified thorns, and they eat the nectar excreted from the leaves. The Tetrapanera penzigi are all right at protection, but they do destroy the nectar glands to prevent other species from taking over the tree. All right, so the termites make mounds that are about 10 to 20 meters in diameter and at most half a meter high. Most of these mounds will stay in the area for hundreds of years because they'll be recolonized over and over again by different generations of termites. By building the mounds, the termites really enrich the soil. They make the habitat more biologically diverse, and they provide resources to other species. So as you can see in this picture, the area below the line is where the termite mound is, and you can tell like that's like 10 times healthier looking than the stuff that's by the trees. So what they call this is an island of fertility that they create, and they enhance the nitrogen, phosphorus, and carbon in the soil. And the soil with these mounds has a lot less clay and has enhanced plant water relations, which is very important because where this study took place at the Lakapi Plateau, about 43% of it is black cotton soil that is poorly drained and has a large amount of clay. So these termite mounds really help enrich the nutrients in the area. So in this study, to find out if fruit production and termite mound proximity were correlated, the tree height, the proximity to a termite mound, the species of ant that inhabited the tree, as well as the number of fruits on each tree were recorded within 3 200-meter areas. As I previously said, any trees with the nigriceps were taken out of the data that was gathered because they sterilized the tree. So no fruit would be produced, so there'd be no point in adding them in. To determine if the vertebrate herbivores had an influence on the fruiting success of the tree, the success of trees in open areas was compared to the success of trees that had been kept from herbivores for 8 years as part of the Kenya long-term exclosure experiment. And this was an experiment that was established in 1995 as a way to determine the effects of wildlife and fire on the ecology in the savanna. They wanted to know how they affected the ecology together as well as separately. And this is actually a picture of one of the exclosures, they called them. And you can see like the whistling thorns in the back here as well. Within this exclosure, they only sampled trees that were near termite mounds to make sure that they knew if the herbivores were what was affecting the reproduction of the trees or not. The nitrogen concentration of leaves from trees going next to and away from the mounds was also measured in both areas with the herbivores as well as areas without the herbivores. And the soil nitrogen and phosphorus concentrations were collected from soils located both in and off of the termite mounds. All of the mounds for this particular sampling were accessible to herbivores, so none of the ones in the exclosure were added into that part. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the results. So of the trees that were grown outside of the exclosure, only 30.7% of the trees growing near a mound produced fruit, and 13.9% of trees growing away from a mound produced fruit. So you can see there's a big difference between the ones with the mounds versus the ones without the mounds. And as you can see on this chart here, the black line is the Joe Steady ant, the light gray is the mimosae, and the dark gray is the Penzigi ant. And 50% of the trees that had the Joe Steady growing with them produced fruit, whereas only 23% of the trees with the mimosae produced fruit, and 20% of the trees with the Penzigi produced fruit. They also found that taller trees were more likely to produce fruit than shorter trees, but this could just be because the taller trees might have been older and more likely to produce fruit. The trees that did produce fruit showed no significant effect of proximity to termite mound, ant species, or tree height on mean fruit production, nor any noteworthy relationship among the variables. So this is the mean number of fruits, and you can see there's not really like a huge difference between the ones that were in the mound versus the matrix soils and like these two graphs. All right, so for this graph, on the left side is the open area that herbivores were allowed, and on the right side is the within the exclosure, and that's for both of these here. So as you can see, there's really no difference in the probability of fruiting nor mean number of fruits produced in the exclosures versus the area with herbivores. So they didn't really have an effect. But the trees near termite mounds, both in the areas with herbivores as well as the areas without herbivores, produced a lot more fruit when the Joe Steady was present in comparison to trees that had the other ants. And on average, the trees within the exclosure produced 56.1 fruits, and trees in areas with herbivores produced 73.8 fruits. So that's not a huge difference. The amount of nitrogen in the leaves was significantly higher in the trees that were grown by the termite mounds versus those that were grown away from the termite mounds. And the presence of herbivores did not seem to have a significant effect on this. And finally, the soil that was collected on the mounds had a significantly higher concentration of nitrogen and phosphorus than the soil that was collected off the mounds, which, you know, they thought was going to happen anyway because termites are known to create more nutrition forward areas. And so in conclusion, the fruiting success of the whistling thorn is likely determined by several indirect and direct effects. However, the termite mounds did appear to positively impact the reproductive success of this tree by altering the composition of the soil in which it existed. The reproductive success does not seem to be affected by herbivores, but the species of ant that lives in the tree may have an impact. And this study did show that the Joe Steady are trees that are inhabited by the Joe Steady are more likely to produce fruit, but further research would be required to find out the reason behind this. They did throw out some hypotheses for this, such as the fact that Joe Steady seem to inhabit older trees, so those trees might just be more likely to produce fruit in general as well. But obviously more research would be required. And there's my references. And do you guys have any questions? We can't hear you.
Oh, great job. Have you been interested in termites before, or what got you kind of?
So I just happened to find this topic when I was previously looking into the koalas, because it was kind of like on a sidebar thing. So I started looking into it like separately. And then, yeah, I got really interested and decided to use it as my topic when I found out I couldn't do the koalas.
Okay. So are you, what are you doing after you, are you graduating this semester?
I'm graduating next semester. I hope to have an internship. Unfortunately, the program that I was going to go to got canceled. So I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing next at this point.
Oh, sure. What are you interested in? What program was it that your internship was going to be part of?
It wasn't an internship. It was the museum and the aquarium and zoo studies that was at the Quad Cities campus.
Has that been canceled?
Yeah, starting after this summer, it's canceled.
Okay, gotcha. Anybody have any questions for Audrey?
Audra, based on what you know, what other questions would you ask? Like if you were to continue this research, what would you like to look at?
So I would like to look into like why specifically the ants choose acacias, because it seems like they definitely have a lot of symbiotic relationships with them. And I'd also like to know like exactly why termites create like these islands of fertility, because I think that'd be like super interesting to find out. Because it's, if you think about termites, you think that they're very like detrimental to trees and stuff, and for them to like help out trees is kind of weird in my opinion.